Hello, everybody. I am Tristan Wade for mypokercoaching.com, and today I am excited to share with you 5 types of poker games you should try at least once. These are going to be a collection of some of the most popular poker games. They might not be your traditional poker formats, but they are very fun nonetheless. We'll start with some normal ones, and then we'll get into some less than natural ones you might not have ever even heard of. So yeah, there's many forms of poker. You could play with 2 cards, you could play with 3 cards, you could play with 4 cards, 5 cards, 6 cards. There's many different kinds, and we're going to cover some of those today. Texas Hold'em is the most popular. You'll find that. You might also enjoy other formats. There's a lot of fun to be played in poker. So just understanding the different game types you can play gets you experience to see what other games you might be interested in. So let's start off with the most popular game first. That is No Limit Texas Hold'em. We call that NLH. We don't always call it NLHE, but you know that gets added to for the hold the and Hold'em. But yeah, this is the most popular format of poker. It's Texas Hold'em. You get 2 cards. You can have anywhere from 1 opponent to 8 or 9 opponents at a table, 9 or 10-handed. Let's not speak about 10-handed, but 8 or 9-handed mostly. If you want to stay in an action and have a game to always play, you have to learn it. And Texas Hold'em is one of those games that's always going to be around. One of my favorite ambassadors, who I used to work with in the WPT, Mike Sexton, he's quoted with saying, "No Limit Hold'em, it takes a minute to learn and a lifetime to master." And that can't be more than the truth. I've been playing for 20 years now, and I still am trying to master the game. I don't know how close I am to that, though. But yeah, No Limit Hold'em is great because it's a mix of both skill and luck, right? You only have 2 cards. There's a round of pre-flop betting. There's a round of flop betting, turn betting, river betting, and then you get to showdown to see the 2 hands. So there's a lot of skill in here because usually you get to play deep stacked. You get to play with a lot of chips. There's a lot of information to be had. And then when you have the nuts, and that might not always change on future cards. So to me, No Limit Hold'em is one of the most fun games. Very exciting, very fun to play. And there's a lot to it. But you only get 2 cards. So when we get into some of these other games, I'll speak on the nuances of that too. The other pros of playing No Limit Hold'em, it's the most popular poker game in the world. So if you want to always have a game, you always want to be able to play against people, then obviously you're going to find a No Limit Hold'em game. We also have a lot of teaching tools available. Not only do we coach people on pokercoaching.com and with mypokercoaching.com, we also use software, we use other calculators, we use computer solvers that all are able to teach us about the nuances of the game. And that's something that's probably been more aware and visible in our industry in the last 5 years or so. We didn't always have access to that kind of technology. So it's really cool if you do want to learn No Limit Hold'em, you can come and study and catch up and have an understanding fairly easily. Very easy access to games online and live all around the world. No Limit Hold'em is played online. If you have any local card rooms or casinos, I'm sure they spread that game. And then tournament players can also thrive in Hold'em. There's a lot of Hold'em tournaments. I'm a sucker for a Hold'em tournament. And yeah, I just love No Limit Hold'em. It's one of my favorite forms of poker. Some of the cons of it are many players play this game very well, hopefully myself included. And you can be card dead for long periods of time. There's nothing more frustrating and a test to your patience to just keep looking down at rags, or have a hand, get a raise and get a couple callers, you miss the flop. You really have to be patient sometimes and disciplined when you do play No Limit Hold'em so you don't make mistakes just because you're not really getting help from the deck. So that would be my particular advice if you do decide to play a lot of Hold'em, is make sure you learn the game, make sure you understand how it works, and then make sure you're patient, because sometimes you need patience when you play poker. All right, moving on to the next format of beautiful poker variants is one of my second favorite games, Pot Limit Omaha. This game is great because it's a big bet poker game. As you can see, it's the second most popular big bet game. And in this, it's just like No Limit Hold'em, except you start with 4 cards, but you must use exactly 2 cards from your hand. So in Hold'em, you use 2, and you can combine your 2 with the 5 on the board to make your best 5-card hand. But in Pot Limit Omaha, you have to use 2 from your hand. So there's no using 4 or 5 cards on the board. You only get to use 3 cards on the board and 2 cards from your hand. And then the other caveat, since this is a pot limit game and not a no limit game, you can only bet the size of the pot. So, the pot is determined with what's in the middle. And yeah, it's just a little different of a game because you can't have the all-in bet unless the pot is big enough for you to go all in. So this game has a lot of variance. You can imagine that because it's 4 cards. You always want to draw to the nuts. You might have flopped the nuts on the flop, but by the turn or river, it is no longer the nuts. So there is a lot of variance to this game. There's a lot of motion. A lot of people want to play flops, turns, and rivers. A lot of people don't fold pre-flop. So there is a lot more variance to this. You're going to need to dodge some luck, some bad luck or good luck, what have you, at different stages when you play Pot Limit Omaha. Some of the pros of the game. It's an action game with bluffing opportunities. Since there are so many different ways to make strong hands and the board dynamics change on the flip of a card, that means someone who flopped a set or flopped a straight, if a flush comes or a full house comes, you might have an advantageous spot to now bluff someone off of a big hand now that the board's changed. So lots of bluffing opportunities. This is one of the most popular games in the world too as well, Pot Limit Omaha. You can find that almost anywhere. And then there aren't as many great players at Omaha tables. People are still learning the game. People aren't as nuanced in it. People either gamble too much or just don't understand the mechanics. But the cons are a lot of variances involved, and finding tournaments can be a challenge. There are big PLO tournaments that happen within series, within the WSOP, World Poker Tour, whatever. Big casinos might be running big tournaments. But other than that, you might not find as many Pot Limit Omaha stuff like tournaments and other side events around. So, it's still a growing game. It's a great game, but there is room for it to grow as well. All right, moving on to another one of my favorite games is Omaha Hi-Lo, 8 or better. And what that means is you basically make a low through ace to 8. So when we say 8 or better, you can make a wheel, ace 2, 3, 4, 5 would be the best hand you can make in the low version of Omaha. But when we're speaking of just the high hands, those can be anything, but the low hands can only be an ace through an 8, with the ace 2, 3, 4, 5 being the best. So this is also, it can be a limit game, and what limit means is every bet is stationary. There's a small bet and a big bet. So the small bet is used pre-flop and on the flop, and then the big bet is usually double that, and that's able to come into play on the turn and river. And when it's limit, it means it's a fixed limit bet. You can only bet that amount or raise that amount. So in limit games, you're not forced to wager all your chips. You're only forced to wager whatever the bet is. And when you play limit games, it's very important to maybe save a bet or earn a bet. And that's kind of how you think about strategies. Rather than in no limit or pot limit, you're playing a much bigger game because you can wager all your chips or wager up to the pot. When we play Omaha Hi-Lo, it is also played as a pot limit game, a limit game, and sometimes a no limit game as well. Like PLO, except the pot is split if a player makes a low that is 8 or better. And that's what I was explaining at the beginning of the video. So it's a split pot game. You have to make a high, you have to make a low. If you look at our other tips here on the screen, Ace, King, Queen, 5 on 8, 7, 4, 3, 2 makes a straight and also the best low, which is a really strong hand. So in that example, our Ace 5 would be winning the low 100% of the time, and our straight would likely be good unless someone has 5, 6, which would make a better straight. So we would most likely win the high hand with the straight and the low hand with the nut low. Now, if someone had the same low with us, then we would just split the pot because we would have the same low and the same high since they're both the same in that. And then for the second example, ace, king, queen, 5 on 8, 7, 4, 3, 3 has ace, king high and also the second best low, which may get half the pot. So if you can see that there, the low cards we would be using are the ace and the 5 from our hand, and the board is 3, 4, 7. Those are the 3 lowest cards on the board. So we would be using ace, 3, 4, 5, 7 would be our low. Now if someone had an ace deuce, they would beat us because they would have an ace, 2, 3, 4, 7. So that's one way to think about the low, and then you also have to think about the high in that spot as well. But really cool game, split pot. You want to make a high and a low, and then you have to be careful because if you make a low, someone might also have the same low, and you might get quartered in the pot because if you have a low and someone else has the same low, you split the low, but then someone gets the high, which is going to be half the pot. So in that game, sometimes you get quartered, sometimes you split the pot, sometimes you lose the pot too. So pretty interesting dynamics with this one. The pros, extremely fun poker variant. You get to make a high and a low hand. You get to try to set up some cool bluffs. You get to try to play in this box of split pot kind of dynamic. So I really like that. You can often win half the pot, which is sometimes worthwhile if you get people stuck around with bad lows or bad highs. And then discipline is rewarded in this game. Again, you want to make your best high card and low card hand. So you want to scoop. This is where scooping comes from. You scoop the pot. When you scoop, you win the high and the low. You win the whole pot. So discipline is rewarded if you're playing good hands, if that make high qualifying hands and low qualifying hands. So a good hand would be like ace, ace, deuce 3, double suited, because then I have a pair of aces, and then I'm drawing to the ace 2 and ace 3 low, and then I have 2 flush draws too. You know, but you might look at a hand like ace, ace, king 2 double suited as being good because maybe high cards come on the board and your low cards don't matter as much. So there's a lot of nuance in that game. Some of the other cons games can be hard to find. You really need to be in a poker loving environment like Las Vegas, where I'm at, or some other good poker scene to have some games like that. And then starting with a tight range, usually with an ace and 2 or 3 is recommended. Yeah, if you have 1, 2, 3 in your hand to start with, it's a pretty good hand, but obviously you can make a good hand with a lot of different cards. So there's a lot to that game as well. Moving on, 5 or 6 card pot limit Omaha. So this is really crazy of a variant. Thinking back to pot limit Omaha, you get 4 cards, you have to use 2. Now we're giving you 5 or 6 cards to start. That's just insane. So think about how many people get dealt in a hand, right? Let's say there's 8 players at a table. That's going to be nearly the deck dealt out. So you can't always play these high card games with that many players because you're going to have to rewash and burn and turn and do all that other stuff. But either way, it's a great game just because of the nuance of it and just how you want to make the nuts, basically. So you can play this for high or high-low. I really only see that being played, 5 or 6 card pot limit Omaha a lot. I do play some Big O, which is 5 card high-low. So that is really another variant, but I don't see too much 6 card pot limit Omaha high-low or high in general. But basically, when you have more cards to start with, you need to play better hands that can draw to the nuts. And that's the real key mechanic here. If you have 5 or 6 cards to start with and you're only using 2, make sure you're connected, make sure you draw to them nuts, make sure you have ace high flush draws, king high flush draws, that kind of stuff. Some more pros and cons of the game. It's more action than any other game, as you can imagine. People are going to play to see a flop, and then when they hit the flop, they're going to get the turns and rivers, so it's only natural. When people have more cards, it's a higher variance game. A lot of players play very badly. This is a great tip here. When they don't go for the nuts, you'll hear me keep drilling that in this video. In card games that have a lot of cards, you have to go for the nuts. But it is very fun to play. You're always going to have something. Trying to pick up 5 or 6 cards at one time if you're playing in person is quite the challenge too. I played a Big O tournament last week, and trying to pick up 5 cards at once and peel them all and see what you have is kind of fun. And then the cons are insane levels of variance. Like I said, you can flop the nuts in a pot limit Omaha game, but if you're playing with 5 or 6 cards, that might mean nothing. So lots of variance in this game, and then it's very hard to play out of position. You're going to get bluffed. You're going to run into bigger hands. Very tough, challenging 5 or 6 card poker games to play. But if you're looking for some fun, if you're looking to try something, I recommend jumping in. And then one of the games I'm probably most unfamiliar with, but I do know how it is played. I do know how it's worked. It's a new game to come to fruition in the poker world the last, 4 or 5 years as well. I believe it might have started in China. I could be very wrong about the origins of short deck, but if anyone in the comments knows, leave a comment down below and let us know. But the easy rules are, hey, look, the rules are still being solidified. We have some rules for short deck, but how people specifically play is still up to the tournament or the group or the organizer or whatever. But basically how short deck works is 2s and 6s are removed from the deck. So the deck just has 7s through aces. And then it's often played with no blinds and just an ante. So that means everyone's ponying something up individually, but there's no blinds to be had. And then flushes beat full houses because it's going to be harder to make a flush than a full house since you have so many 2s and 6s removed from the deck. And this game has a lot of variance. You got to be very cautious. It's really a flop game. It's not really about what you have pre-flop. You can see the pre-flop percentages are really skewed in some of the spots where you think you're a big favorite, but you're not. It's really 60-40 or something. So this game too has a lot of variance. The pros, it's easier to get a good starting hand, right? When all the 2s and 6s are removed from the deck, yeah, you're going to lean closer to having good cards and connect and be suited and what have you. There's more action generated overall, and the popularity is growing with short deck by the day. The cons is the skill edge is partially diminished, right? Because it's such a high variance game, the edges are going to get smaller when you play in a game like that. And then the variance is higher than Hold'em. So, as we put these slides together, it seems like we got like maybe the best skillful games, No Limit Hold'em, Pot Limit Omaha at the top. And then once we get into these other 5-card games or, Omaha Hi-Lo, 5-card poker, 6-card poker, and short deck, the skill can be there still, but the edge is going to be a little diminished because these games are just very volatile because you either start with 5 or 6 cards or just the dynamic of the game in general creates a lot of variance. So just beware in that sense. And, overall, be careful. Be careful, right? There are many types of poker with new ones being created all the time. If you are not well-versed at a game, do not play it for high stakes. Learn a game before you try to jump in and mix it up with everybody and go crazy. That's what I do. I like to play small stakes. I like to play for free, even if I don't know a game. And then I'll go put a little money up while I learn and stuff. And then, like I said, start small. And if you want to play the game a lot, study it a lot. I've been playing No Limit Hold'em for 20 years. I've been playing Pot Limit Omaha as well. Omaha 8 or better. There's some other variants we didn't list of games that I play as well, like Stud 8 or better, Raz. Those are kind of fixed limit games as well. But if you love poker, if you really want to learn some of these new variants of games, make sure you get an understanding of how the game works, an understanding of how to play, some strategies you should be following, and then study, play, take your time, and give it a go. So yeah, I'm a longtime poker professional. It's not easy to do this for a living, but you have to be smart, you have to be careful, you have to be calculated, and you really need to know what you're getting into, right? Make smart bets, don't make bad bets, and always know what's happening before you jump in a game. I hope you enjoyed this video for my poker coaching. I am Tristan Wade, teaching you all of the different kinds of poker variants that are available to you, and I hope to see you at the tables one day. Signing out. See you then.